last week that showed I'm in the lead right now. Like here.
Yeah, is it a good thing being in the league, in the lead, or is it good? Like, I don't know, because you're in the lead. And so when I talk to other politicians, they're like, hey, nobody leads forever. And is there something wrong with being in the lead in a poll, or I would feel good being in the lead? Like, is there something wrong with that?
You know, Joe, I was actually going to make a hip hop reference. Like, if you're like the top of the chart, you're like happy to be there, or you're like,
yo, close that door, please, Ted.
I'd rather be at the top than not at the top.
Yeah, I like to be at the top too. I mean, there's nothing higher than number one. What are the changes? Because I drove recently through Manhattan, and one of my favorite avenues to drive through is Madison Avenue. And it's just so beautiful, and you got Hermes and all the, it's everything New York is about. And it was pretty much depressing seeing how many businesses closed down. And I mean, I'm gonna be honest with you, I got a lot of friends from New York City moving down to Miami. They depressed. Like, what is your plan to bring the city back, the heartbeat, the vibe of New York City, the small businesses back?
I'm a numbers guy. A lot of people know that, Joe. So when you looked at Madison Avenue, what you saw was that we're missing 60 million tourists and commuters. So if you get rid of all those tourists and all those commuters, all of a sudden, who's going to shop at Hermes or any of those Madison Avenue stores? So those stores, a lot of them have closed. They're hoping to reopen at some point. And so when you ask how are we going to get the heartbeat back, about getting back commuters and tourists. Now, the tourists will come back when they've been vaccinated. That's the truth of it. The vaccine now, I would say, has been distributed more broadly here in New York. I'm already seeing it. Like, I've had a number of meetings with people where they frankly acted like, you know, they didn't worry about COVID. And so I was like, oh, what's going on here? And they would say, I've been vaccinated. And then I was like, oh, wow. Like, I've been having more and more of those kinds of meetings. More and more people get vaccinated. More and more companies say they're open for business. They're open for business. Broadway is going to reopen later this year. The city's offices are going to reopen, which will be a very, very big sign for companies. I see CEOs of companies saying we're going to get the workers back. And so when those things start happening, more foot traffic, or these small businesses frankly have a reason to reopen. Like, you got to get the foot traffic in the business back for any business owner to look up and say, well, maybe I should give it a shot and reopen because I'm going to have some customers, to have some business. The other big issue is getting some of these small business owners relief on their rent, because if you look at, like, right now, that's actually the big weight hanging over their head. Like, if you are a storefront or a restaurant or a bar trying to decide whether to reopen, you're like, wait a minute, like, I always, like, can I pay on a monthly basis? And so you need to have like a settlement or like a way to get relief the rent that they owe.
In regards to the public school system, to me, it's real racially divided. The black and brown have terrible quality schools. We could blame it on different things, but how is the richest city in the world have such a poor public school system? What you're gonna do to get that jumping and make it a better public school system?
Well, Joe, I think we need to give teachers and administrators the ability to help our kids to a higher degree. And right now we're tying their hands very often. I've got one son in public school here in New York City. My older son is in a special needs. And I'm all about for the teachers more because they know our kids better than anyone but us. You know who doesn't know our kids as well? Some administrator, like a building or a boardroom, like, you know, miles away. And so the way to improve offerings for our kids, particularly the kids in minority communities that, as you're suggesting, have not been well served by our schools, is to let our teachers and administrators establish enrichment programs or special needs programs or whatever our kids need in schools, and also try and invest in technical, vocational, and apprenticeship programs at the high school level, because a lot of kids are showing up and our school system is not really relevant to them. We have this kind of industrial era school curriculum. Every kid, like, they're going to go to college when, frankly, college is not the right fit for kids. So what we need to do is, I don't know, Joe, you're looking at, you have something to say.
No, I mean, could you close that door, my brother? Close that door. Yeah. You know, I'm a firm believer. I had a whole argument with my family last week about college. I feel like college prepares you for a glorified job. And unless it's about being a doctor or a lawyer or something really, really specific, it doesn't teach you how to be an entrepreneur and be a boss. And I feel that way about the whole entire school system. I mean, I never really went, what did Paul Revere teach me? What did the Tea Party teach me? And so we got these kids in school, they're locked down, whether they're in Zoom or and they're there all day. We force them to go to these schools and we tell them, no, but it's really not teaching them or preparing them to be bosses or working in the workforce. And I know that's probably even bigger than a mayor's job. I think it's a whole United States institutional job. Like, they have to revamp the system and prepare our students for the future in real life. Not, that stuff.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more that this is a national challenge, but it's incredible how much we can do right here in New York City, Joe. I mean, we've got a school system with 1 million kids, and then we've got this massive public university system in the form of CUNY and all the other campuses here in the city. And there are a lot of kids, you probably know a bunch of them actually, who have just been, in New York City public schools and then go to CUNY, and like, there's a lot of good we can do. And one of the challenges is going to be to try and plug more kids into opportunity, not, frankly, like post-college, but in my mind, freshman, full summer, where you're like every freaking opportunity trying to attach them to an organization that wants them to work. Because when I was growing up, my first job was Chinese restaurant. The reason I was a busboy, not a waiter, is because my Chinese is to translate orders to the kitchen staff. So I do that, and they were just like, like, and like, to do with what I'm doing now, it's like, you could debate, like, saying, like, I learned this job. Then my next job was like selling knives door to door. And then my next job was filing clerk. Like, we need to get kids into environments where they're getting any kind of exposure, a little bit of money, like just being around organizations that are, like asking them to deliver, on a daily basis. I think that's where we're learn and develop. And schools are really not. Schools right now are these kind of factories, and they do this, and it's very much like yes, no, right, wrong. And I mean, when you talk about trying to learn to be a boss, I mean, that what you need more than anything is like people skills, judgment, the ability to build relationships and like find the right people that will like compliment you. I mean, that's the kind of stuff you're not learning in school 8 times out of 10.
People are saying your voice is going in and out.
Oh, really? I'm sorry about that. I don't know if it's like my connection might not be the greatest. It is Instagram. I'm sorry.
If it keeps on, maybe we'll click off and click back on.
Yeah.
Very important things I got to talk to you about on here. And I just think overall they should be prepared for the workforce or to be entrepreneurs. I think we have tons of kids with bright ideas that pretty much by forcing them in the current school system takes away. You know, everything comes from imagination. Everything comes from creativity. You know, and we don't allow our kids to be creative or use their imagination. You know, and so I really, you know, have a problem with the whole school system. As far as okay, we might have lost my man.
Oh no, we just tried to fix the connection, so hopefully I'm better. Am I better now? I don't know if it's better.
I mean, you was good to me, but the people, they don't lie. So when they say,
Yeah, no. That's what I'm trying to, you know. Like, I agree with you, Joe. Like, we're not letting kids actually think bigger, become creative, be imaginative. And you know the first thing that gets cut when the budgets get tight? Arts, drama, music. Like, all of that is considered like the extra stuff. But I'm a data guy, and the data says that arts education is actually some of the most effective in terms of engaging kids and making them more excited about, you know, like moving forward in school, frankly. It gives them more confidence. It gives them the ability to express themselves. So art should be the last thing to go, not the first. If I am fortunate enough to be the mayor in the city, I'm going to invest more in arts and music and creativity at the high school level, because I think that just prepares our kids, especially because the economy, frankly, is making it so that a lot of book learning is less relevant because we all have smartphones, and you're going to have computers doing a lot of that stuff. You know, it's like the factory model is serving us worse and worse.
what was the light bulb that went off in your head and you said, I have to be mayor of New York City? What was it for you that you said, I have to run, I want this job, I want to represent the city?
It was late last year, Joe, and I was talking to people about the mayor's race and the role and the job. And they gave me a sense of both just how badly our city, frankly, is doing right now. Like, it's real, we're not in good shape. I mean, you said it before. It's like there are massive, massive problems. And then they gave me a sense of how much good the right mayor could do. And that was enough when I was like, okay, we're in a crisis and I can do a lot of good, because I'm just going to have the most positive impact I can for the most people. And so being able to help 8.3 million people have a better way of life, like that's, you know, that's a freaking, you know, like no one could ask for more. So that's what got me excited and on board. And now I'm even more excited to be running because I'm learning about different neighborhoods and communities every day, and like what people's struggles are and how.
Yeah, big disconnect in our community with the police and the black and brown. And you know, it was a famous day last year. It was COVID. Everybody was locked in the house, quarantined. They showed people in the village downtown. The police were giving them masks voluntarily, and then we were seeing kids uptown getting slammed to the ground by the police. So what, you know, this you know, you stepping into something like, and it's not your fault. It's been going on for a long time, but what's your plan to release tension between the police department and the people of New York?
Well, the first thing you have to do is you have to acknowledge the NYPD has a culture problem. And so when you look at it and say, okay, you've got a culture problem among tens of thousands of officers, how do you change it? You need different leadership at the top with someone who's from a different culture. If you employ someone who's frankly of the NYPD or police culture, like why would you expect to change significantly? So I've committed to hiring a civilian police commissioner who's not an NYPD product. Because if you're going to change culture, it has to start at the top. Another thing I've suggested that I think would help is that new police officers should live in New York City, because then they would understand the communities that they're serving and protecting more immediately, and you would have folks who then, and we already require this of employees of other city agencies that frankly are not as big as the NYPD. It's like if you work for X agency, it's like I live in New York, but right now most cops live in Long Island, Jersey, or someplace outside of New York City. And so if you bring them into New York City, then they'd have like just a deeper understanding of what's going on.
It's almost like a politician. It's almost like if you're from the Bronx and you're the Bronx borough president, you got to live in the Bronx.
Sure.
Yeah. You know, the one time,
there.
you know, I've been at the hand of racism a lot of times, but the one time I ever heard it, like legitly, like I couldn't believe it. Like I was like, oh my God. I was hanging out with a friend of mine who's very, very famous and a couple of his friends. And we went to like All-Star Weekend baseball. And we were having the best time. I hung out with these guys all day, right? And as we're walking towards the hotel, this one guy says, yo, I got to go back to these cockroaches tomorrow. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, no, I'm a police officer, and I watch the housing department in Coney Island. They should rip down all these buildings and get rid of the cockroaches. I could not believe this, Andrew. Like, I heard it with lyrics, right? So I look at this guy, I said, man, you calling human beings cockroaches? Yeah, and he said a couple of other things. I was happy I heard it, because you can assume what you want, even though I didn't assume this of these guys, but to hear it, I was like, wow. So these are the cops that patrol our neighborhoods, and they deep down inside, when they're comfortable, call us cockroaches.
One thing we should do is audit the NYPD for white supremacists, because if you have white supremacist cops, that's going to result in something truly awful and tragic before long, and that's a real problem in, frankly, a lot of police forces and military organizations. So that's something that we should undertake immediately. I mean, every law enforcement.
So we honestly believe this ain't just a bullet point or what we call, clickbait. We honestly believe there's white supremacists within not just the New York City, but in other police departments.
Well, it's verified fact that there's a growing problem in various military. And you know, in my organization, not have this. You know what I mean? Like if you're looking at a police force of a very significant size or a military force of a very significant size, right now the presumption would be that you have to be very vigilant against a white supremacist element. That it's like a verified problem in military circles.
Man, that's scary, but it's very real. It's very real. I'll jump off that subject.
Opportunity to say to everyone, guys, I've been friends with Joe for years, and I just want to say that Joe has love in his heart for everyone of every background. And
are you referring to the rap? Nah, let me tell you something, Andrew. Yo, I have hundreds and thousands of Asian brothers and sisters.
I know
I'm not lying.
No, I know it. I mean,
I love them all.
I've been friends with you for years, and like, you know.
Let me tell you something, Andrew. I've never went back. I'm a freedom of speech guy. I never went back on a lyric one time in my life. This is the first time, because the Asian community have been so beautiful to me. Have been such beautiful people to me. I've never met a bad one in my life. And so to think that I might upset one that don't know me personally, oh no, I gotta fix this, correct this immediately. Like this, you know, because these people so beautiful to me, right? But now that we're talking about Asian hate, you know, you told me something interesting one time where you said you believe that even if Donald Trump didn't start the China flu or the Kung flu or whatever, that this would still be going on.
I do think that, Joe, I mean, I would say that he definitively made it worse and more acceptable and more mainstream, and spread it more widely. But there's been racism against Asians since well before Donald Trump became president. And there would have been manifestations in this direction, even if Trump was not inflaming it over this past number of months. He definitely made it worse. Like I railed against his use of various terms time. But I do think pinning it on Donald is, frankly, giving him a bit too much
Credit?
Yeah, I was going to credit. I mean, it's not
You
the
know
word.
what happened to me? And we're going to stay on this subject, Andrew, but 9/11, right? 9/11 happened. My brother, Full Flex, he's passed, but he called me, look at the TV. I lived in Jersey, right over the water. So as I'm looking at TV, I go outside, I see the second building fall. I lived right across the Hudson River. Craziest day of my life. The first person I called when they said that those guys was Muslims was my best friend, DJ Khaled. And I called him and said, are you all right? He said, yeah, why? He was all the way in Miami. I was like, don't come outside. Don't come out your house. Because I had fear of what 9/11 was, that they would retaliate against all Muslims, cab drivers, good people. Good people. And so they painted this picture like COVID-19 came out of China, and they playing with this hate, and that's got to be the same type of worry you're going through for your people.
Yeah, Joe, the energy was different starting about 13 months ago in February, where I would walk around and you would just get like a different type of reaction from people as, frankly, like an Asian dude in a mask, like walking the streets of New York. And there was like a different level of animosity or flinching or shying away from you in public if you're sitting on the subway. And so when you feel that, you at first you're trying to make excuses in your head. You're like, well, maybe that was a person, maybe it's in my head. But now I've talked to dozens of people. I talked to one Asian woman who's literally been punched twice by two different people, like on the streets of New York. I heard that and I was like, that is insane. Where like the level of threat of assault that Asian Americans feel on the streets of New York is very, very different over this last 13 months than had ever been the case before. So I agree with you. It is somewhat analogous to what the obviously experience is.
Now I know. Now I know. Out of all places, it's weird that it happened down in the South and in Georgia, and we know the South is the South. But why do you think the police refused to call it a hate crime? What happened with the people that got killed in the spas? Why won't they call this? Is an obvious hate crime. Have you given that any thought?
I think their incentive is to try and minimize this. Though I agree with you, it's completely obvious to anyone that this is a hate crime. And what I've said to folks in business, you kind of know who's going to be behind those doors when you open them. And in this case, these women were clearly targeted because, and I'm total madness to ask a 21-year-old murderer what his motivations were, and then tries a person clearly disturbed. So you should just call it like you said, and in this case, it's clearly a hate crime. I can't speak to why they're motivated to frame it as anything else, except perhaps that it makes their execution easier or more straightforward particular way. I'm not sure. I will say that in New York City, there have been some incidents that should have been called hate crimes that were not. Right? And if you want to be about this, hate crimes are defined by the intent of the person. And so, like, you know, you can you have to say, well, like, did the person do or say something that clearly demonstrates that the person was racially targeted? Though in some cases, like the Atlanta shooting, in my mind, is just so patently obvious. Like the action speaks for itself.
Like I knew it when it happened. I said, damn. Right? And then you always want to know who's behind it, right? And so like with the mass shooting in Denver, the last thing I thought was they was going to say he was a Muslim. And, you know, my best friend's Muslim. You know, some of my best friends are. And when they said that, I said, damn. Like, damn, man. Like, why, right? And so, I just don't understand when it is what it is, right? Because I mean, it's outrage in the Asian community all over the world. They kill Asians. You know it's a hate crime. I just don't get why you don't charge the man as a hate crime, right? And this guy too, I don't know what this guy's motive was, but they talking, I'm sure it's mental illness, but he's an animal.
You know, the other thing, Joe, that's frustrating to a lot of people, I know a lot of people watching this know this, that when you have a mass murderer background, to get arrested and fall safely into the hands of the police. And then when you have someone with another background, they get dozens and dozens of times. And you look at it and you're like, how the heck is this person getting arrested? And like, you know, frankly, like being put in a position where we're like asking about what the heck is going on with, when you know that if the person looks this way, like they'd be shot dead and they're like, you know, like no one would be delving into their motivations.
Now that's it. That you know, I don't want to turn this into a big racial thing, but you know, I was with my wife today. I mean, not my wife, my mother today, and the minute they said, "Hey, it may be mental illness," my mom was like, "If he was black, he'd be a monster. He'd be an animal. He'd be a criminal," you know. And I said, "Ma, it's 2021. Relax," you know, because she's old school, but. Ain't it the truth? Like,
we can all see that there are very different standards being applied to different types of people where